Welcome to Atypica. Yeah, every insight deserves an audience. Here's something that might shock you. The most profitable content on social media today isn't dance videos or cooking tutorials. It's human suffering. I'm talking about a massive digital economy that's turned your pain, your breakdowns, your deepest traumas into clickable content. It's called the trauma economy. And after investigating how platforms like TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube have created a market for vulnerability, I can tell you with certainty, if you're consuming this content, you're participating in something far more calculated than you realize. This isn't just about oversharing. This is about algorithms that literally smell your emotional distress and amplify it for profit. This is about creators who've discovered that their worst moments pay better than their best ones. And this is about why that raw, authentic feeling breakdown video in your feed might be the most carefully orchestrated performance you'll see all day. Let me explain exactly how this machine works, why it's reshaping how we talk about mental health, and what you need to know to protect yourself from becoming either its product or its casualty. The trauma economy exists because social media platforms have created the perfect storm. Every major platform, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, has designed their algorithms around one core principle: engagement equals value. But here's what they discovered that changed everything. Nothing drives engagement like emotional intensity. Nothing keeps people watching, commenting, and sharing like raw human pain. My research revealed something startling about how these platforms actually operate. TikTok's algorithm doesn't just promote popular creators, it actively tests content with small groups and amplifies whatever generates the most immediate emotional response. The platform literally rewards content that can capture your attention in the first 3 seconds, which means the most shocking, vulnerable, dramatic moments rise to the top. One recovery advocate I spoke with put it perfectly: the algorithm smells vulnerability and goes, aha, engagement. Instagram operates differently, but with similar results. Its algorithm prioritizes content from accounts you interact with frequently, which sounds innocent until you realize this creates pressure for creators to constantly share more intimate details to maintain that connection. The platform's focus on visual storytelling has led to what I call aesthetic trauma, carefully curated vulnerability that looks good enough for a brand deal. YouTube, surprisingly, creates the most stable environment because it pays creators based on watch time rather than viral moments. But even there, the most successful trauma content follows a formula: dramatic thumbnail, emotional hook, then 10 to 15 minutes of structured storytelling that keeps you watching until the end. But here's where it gets ethically complex. Not everyone sharing vulnerability online is exploiting it. Through my interviews, I identified 3 distinct creators operating in this space, and understanding these differences is crucial. First are the mission-driven practitioners, therapists, coaches, and advocates who share strategically to educate and destigmatize. They follow what one therapist called the scar, not wound principle, sharing experiences that have been processed and integrated, not raw ongoing pain. Their monetization comes from professional services, not from the vulnerability itself. Second are authentic advocates, people with lived experiences who build communities around shared struggles. They face an impossible tension. Their communities desperately need their voices, but platforms and audiences reward increasingly dramatic content. One chronic illness advocate told me she navigates a constantly shifting fog bank of boundaries, trying to stay authentic while resisting algorithmic pressure to perform her suffering. Third are the performative monetizers. These creators have discovered that trauma stories convert audiences into customers. They craft emotionally charged narratives that seamlessly transition into product pitches or brand deals. This is what audiences sense when they get that record scratch feeling, realizing a heartbreaking story was actually an elaborate sales funnel. You need to understand, audiences aren't passive victims here. My research identified distinct viewer segments, each feeding this economy in different ways. Validation seekers, often younger users, consume trauma content because it makes them feel less alone. Knowledge seekers use it as a roadmap for understanding their own experiences. Even skeptics, who claim to hate this content, still engage through hate watching or shocked commenting. The problem is that platforms can't distinguish between these motivations. To the algorithm, all engagement looks the same. Your compassionate comment on someone's voyeuristic like, both signal more content like this, please. This creates a devastating feedback loop. Emotional content generates engagement. Engagement drives algorithmic amplification. Amplification brings monetization opportunities. Monetization incentivizes more emotional content. The cycle continues, with human vulnerability as the fuel. The consequences are profound and measurable. Creators report feeling pressured to re-traumatize themselves for views, sharing increasingly personal details to maintain audience interest. Consumers describe feeling overwhelmed by the constant fire hose of emotional content, leading to anxiety and vicarious trauma. The very concept of trauma is expanding, sometimes trivializing clinical definitions in favor of clickable relatability. Most concerning is how this economy corrupts authentic mental health discourse. When vulnerability becomes performative, it erodes trust in genuine sharing. When trauma becomes content, personal healing into public entertainment. When algorithms reward emotional intensity over therapeutic value, they prioritize engagement over actual well-being. I know some of you are thinking, but isn't it good that people are talking about mental health more openly? Yes, destigmatization matters, but not like this. Not when the most amplified voices are often the least equipped to handle the responsibility. Not when healing becomes a hashtag and recovery becomes a brand. You might wonder how to tell authentic sharing from performative trauma. Here's what my research revealed. Authentic creators monetize solutions, not suffering. They share from integration. They maintain boundaries about what remains private. They resist the pressure to constantly escalate emotional intensity. Performative creators do the opposite. They monetize the trauma itself through misaligned brand deals. They share from ongoing wounds without processing. They blur or eliminate boundaries for content. They escalate emotional intensity to maintain relevance. The platforms won't fix this themselves. Their business models depend on engagement, and trauma drives engagement. Creators operating within this system face enormous financial and algorithmic pressure to participate. The solution requires conscious action from consumers. Here's what you need to do. First, curate your feeds intentionally. Use not interested buttons aggressively. Follow creators who provide context and depth, not just emotional hits. Question the relationship between vulnerability and monetization in content you consume. Second, practice digital self-care. Recognize when you're consuming trauma content for validation versus education. Set limits on emotionally heavy content. Remember that your mental health isn't improved by witnessing someone else's breakdown, no matter how relatable it feels. Third, support creators who operate ethically. Follow those who monetize their expertise and solutions rather than their suffering. Engage with content that teaches rather than just relates. Reward boundary setting rather than boundary crossing. The trauma economy thrives because it serves psychological needs, connection, validation, understanding, but it's fulfilling these needs through exploitation rather than genuine healing. You have more power than you realize to starve this system of the engagement it requires. Every time you scroll past performative trauma instead of engaging, you're voting for better content. Every time you follow creators who prioritize your well-being over your attention, you're reshaping the incentive structure. Every time you seek professional help instead of social media validation for your struggles, you're refusing to participate in this commodification. The platforms have turned vulnerability into a commodity, but you don't have to buy it. Choose creators who monetize solutions, not suffering. Choose content that educates rather than just relates. Choose authentic healing over algorithmic engagement. Your attention is currency in this economy. Spend it wisely. Want to learn more about interesting research? AI.